The flames danced like ravenous beasts, devouring everything in their path. Smoke churned into the twilight sky, painting it a sinister red as the sirens wailed in the distance. Somewhere within the inferno, a small voice pierced through the chaos, not with sound but with raw emotion, threading into Alec Trent's mind like a desperate whisper. "Help us, please." Alec froze mid-step, his rugged boots crunching against the cracked pavement. The voice wasn't human, but it was unmistakably real. He scanned the fiery horizon, his pulse hammering in his ears. The fire had erupted in the heart of the alien residential district, an area humans like him were rarely welcome. But that voice, it pulled at something deep inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. "Damn it," he muttered, shoving aside the instinct to walk away. Gripping the utility knife strapped to his belt, Alec turned toward the blaze, his jaw tightening. He wasn't a hero, not anymore, but the weight of that silent plea was too much to ignore. The fire engulfed Sarindra's residential sector. The firestorm raged through the crowded district of Vale Mar, a sector designed for the Ilyari, fragile, delicate beings who thrived in crystalline habitats but were ill-suited for physical danger. Their homes, a mix of organic architecture and energy-infused materials, were now reduced to molten rubble. Shouts and screams reverberated through the air as Ilyari families scrambled for safety. Their bioluminescent skin flickered like fireflies against the encroaching darkness. Emergency responders, mostly human, hesitated at the perimeter, unsure of how to navigate the alien-designed infrastructure. Tensions between the species were already razor-sharp. Any wrong move could escalate into full-scale riots. For now, the Ilyari were left to fend for themselves. In the middle of the chaos, Karel, an Ilyari widow, clutched her young son Linux tightly. She pressed her back against the shattered remains of a wall, her translucent skin glowing faintly as she fought to steady her breathing. Her husband, the brilliant scientist who had once been the family's anchor, was gone. Now it was just her and Linux, vulnerable, hunted, and trapped in a nightmare. "Linux, stay close to me," Karel whispered, her voice trembling. "Don't use your telepathy unless it's absolutely necessary. They'll find us if you do." Linux nodded, his wide, silvery eyes shimmering with fear. "But, Mama, someone's coming. I can feel it. A human." Karel's heart sank. "A human? On this side of the city?" She tightened her grip on her son and looked around, the heat of the fire prickling against her sensitive skin. Whoever it was, they weren't likely to be friendly. "Not here. Not now." Alec's approach. Alec trudged forward, sweat slicking his face as the heat intensified. The district was a labyrinth of glowing structures now twisted into unrecognizable wreckage. His military instincts kicked in, analyzing every sound, every shadow, every potential threat. He wasn't here for glory. He wasn't here to prove a point. He just wanted to find whoever had sent that desperate mental cry and get them out. "Fast. Hello?" Alec called, his gravelly voice cutting through the roar of the flames. "If you're still alive in there, make some noise." A moment of silence stretched too long, broken only by the crackling fire. Then, like a fragile thread weaving through the chaos, he felt it again. The voice, clearer this time. "Dear, please. Help us." Alec followed the tug in his mind, winding through the smoldering ruins until he spotted them. A woman and a child huddled together, their glowing forms barely visible through the smoke. The woman's eyes widened when she saw him, her fear palpable even from a distance. "Don't come any closer," Karel shouted, holding Linux behind her protectively. Alec raised his hand slowly. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said, coughing against the smoke. "I'm here to help." The danger escalates. Before Karel could respond, a beam from the collapsing structure above groaned ominously. Alec didn't think, he just moved. Sprinting forward, he grabbed them both, dragging them out of the way just as the beam crashed to the ground, sending sparks and debris into the air. "Let go of me," Karel protested, struggling against him. Linux clung to her, his glowing eyes filled with confusion. "Lady, you want to die here, fine," Alec snapped, his voice laced with urgency. "But I'm not sticking around to watch. We've got to move now." Karel hesitated, her instincts screaming to protect her child. But the human's grip was firm, his intent clear. Reluctantly, she nodded, allowing him to lead them out of the immediate danger. A moment of fragile trust. Once they were a safe distance from the collapsing structure, Alec released his grip and took a step back, giving them space. He wiped soot from his face, his blue-gray eyes scanning their surroundings for any further threats. "Who are you?" Carell demanded, her voice still shaky but edged with defiance. "Alec," he said simply. "And you?" "Carell. This is my son Linux." Alec nodded, his gaze shifting to the boy, who was staring at him with an unsettling intensity. He wasn't used to Ilyari eyes, so large, so reflective. It was like the kid was looking straight through him. "Your kid called for me," Alec said after a beat. "In my head. That's why I'm here." Carell stiffened. She cut herself off, gripping Linux's shoulders. "We don't need your help. We'll manage on our own." Alec smirked, though there was no humor in it. "Lady, with half the city on fire and looters crawling all over the place, you're gonna need all the help you can get." The seed of a larger threat. As they prepared to move, a shadow passed overhead. Alec's eyes darted skyward, where a small drone hovered, its red lens gleaming like an ominous eye. It wasn't a rescue drone. It was something else, something far more sinister. "They're tracking us," Carell whispered, her voice trembling with dread. "Who?" Alec demanded. Carell didn't answer. Instead, she pulled Linux closer, her glowing skin dimming with fear. Alec clenched his jaw, his instincts screaming that this was more than just a random fire. There was something bigger at play, and like it or not, he was now part of it. "Great," he muttered under his breath. "What the hell have I gotten myself into?" As the flames continued to rage in the distance, Alec realized this wasn't just about saving 2 lives. It was about uncovering the truth behind the fire, and staying alive long enough to do it. The walls groaned under the weight of the blaze, splitting open like the earth itself was protesting. Ash rained from above, a choking blizzard of destruction. Alec crouched low, his heart pounding as the searing heat clawed at his skin. Somewhere behind him, the child whimpered, and the mother's sharp, ragged breaths punctuated the suffocating silence. "This place is a death trap," Alec muttered, glancing over his shoulder. "If we don't move now, we're all toast." But it wasn't the fire he feared most. It was the faint hum overhead, a predator's growl barely masked by the chaos. The struggle for survival. Carell's grip on Linux tightened as the 3 moved through the twisted remains of her once thriving neighborhood. The Ilyari widow's glowing skin flickered like a failing beacon, her exhaustion evident. Alec led the way, navigating the debris with the precision of a soldier, though his frustration was mounting. "Stick close," he barked, his tone sharp but controlled. "These buildings could come down any second." "I'm aware," Carell snapped, her voice strained but defiant. She stumbled slightly, catching herself on a jagged piece of rubble. Linux, his small hand clasped in hers, glanced up at her, his eyes wide and full of fear. "Mom, I'm scared," the boy whispered telepathically. "I know, my love," she replied silently, her tone soothing despite the chaos. "We'll be okay. Just keep walking." Alec caught the faint flicker of their telepathic exchange and scowled. "Whatever you're doing, cut it out. If they're tracking us, that's as good as sending up a damn flare." Carell glared at him but said nothing. He was right, but admitting it felt like surrender. A treacherous path. The trio reached what used to be a community plaza, now a scorched wasteland of molten glass and smoldering remains. The air shimmered with heat, distorting their view of the far side where an emergency exit ramp led to safety. "There," Alex said, pointing. "That's our way out." Carell hesitated. The ramp was exposed and the hum of the drone was growing louder. "It's too open," she said, her voice low. "We'll be seen. And staying here's a better plan?" Alex shot back, already moving. "Look, lady, I don't know what kind of enemies you've made, but if we stay put, we're dead." Carell bit her lip, her instincts screaming to protect her child at all costs. Finally she nodded. "Fine. But if anything happens to him?" "It won't," Alec interrupted, his voice firm. "Not on my watch." The drone's attack. As they stepped onto the ramp, the sound of the drone shifted, its hum turning into a sharp, mechanical whine. Alex stopped mid-step, his eyes narrowing. "Get down," he shouted, pushing Carell and Linux behind a chunk of debris. The drone fired, its beams slicing through the air where they'd just been standing. Carell screamed, shielding Linux with her body. Alec pulled out his utility knife, the weapon laughably primitive against the sleek, deadly machine. "Stay here," he ordered, moving toward the drone. "What are you doing?" Carell hissed. "Ending this," Alex said, his voice cold. The drone swooped low, its targeting system locking onto him. Alec waited, every muscle in his body coiled like a spring. As the drone fired again, he dove to the side, rolling to his feet in one fluid motion. The beam struck a nearby pillar, sending a shower of sparks cascading down. "You're fast," Alec muttered, wiping sweat from his brow. "But I'm faster." Using the debris for cover, he closed the distance between himself and the drone. When it swooped down for another attack, he leapt onto a broken column and launched himself at it, his knife slicing into the exposed circuitry. The drone let out a high-pitched screech, its movements erratic as Alec clung to it. Sparks flew, and the machine spiraled out of control, crashing into the ground in a fiery explosion. Alec rolled clear of the wreckage, coughing and covered in soot. He looked up to see Carell staring at him, her expression a mixture of shock and reluctant admiration. "You're insane," she said. "Maybe," Alec replied, dragging himself to his feet. "But you're alive, aren't you?" The final push. The path ahead was clear now, but their time was running out. The fire was closing in, and the structure groaned ominously as its foundations began to give way. "Move!" Alec shouted, ushering Carell and Linux forward. Carell scooped Linux into her arms, her bioluminescent skin dimming further as exhaustion took its toll. Alec stayed close, his eyes darting to every shadow, every flicker of movement. They reached the edge of the district just as the final collapse began. Alec grabbed Carell's arm, practically dragging her through the last stretch of rubble. The ground shook violently, and for a moment, it felt like they wouldn't make it. But then they were through, stumbling onto the open street where emergency responders were waiting. A moment of fragile relief. Carell sank to her knees, clutching Linux tightly as tears streamed down her face. Alec stood a few feet away, his hands on his knees as he caught his breath. The responders approached cautiously, their eyes flicking between the human and the two Ilyari. "You okay?" one of them asked Alec. "Fine," he said gruffly, waving them off. He turned back to Carell and Linux, his expression unreadable. "You're safe now," he said, his voice softer than before. Carell looked up at him, her glowing eyes filled with gratitude and something else, something harder to define. "Thank you," she whispered. Alec nodded, but he didn't reply. He wasn't a hero. He was just a man who couldn't ignore a cry for help. But as he watched the responders escort Carell and Linux to safety, he couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't the end of their story. Not by a long shot. The stars above shimmered like cold, distant sentinels, offering no comfort. Alec paced the confines of the safe house, his boots scuffing against the cracked tile floor. Every shadow seemed alive with threat, and the silence wasn't peace, it was the kind that came before an ambush. "We shouldn't have come here," Carell said from across the room, her tone edged with frustration. She cradled Linux in her arms, her protective instincts sharp as a blade. "This place is exposed." Alec stopped mid-stride, turning to face her. "We didn't have a choice," he said, his voice low but firm. "Unless you've got a hidden spaceship parked nearby, this is the best we've got." "I didn't ask for your help," she snapped. "And yet here we are," Alec shot back, his eyes narrowing. "You'd be dead if it weren't for me. A little gratitude wouldn't kill you." The clash of worlds. The air between them crackled with tension, two survivors from vastly different worlds struggling to coexist. Carell's luminescent skin glowed faintly in the dim light, a stark reminder of her alien nature. Alec, rugged and human, felt every inch the outsider in her presence, despite being on his own planet. "Gratitude?" Carell said, her voice rising. "You think this is about gratitude? I trusted you to keep us safe, and now we're trapped in this cage waiting for them to find us." Alec's jaw tightened. I'm doing my best, lady. Maybe cut me some slack instead of blaming me for every damn thing. Linux stirred in her arms, his wide, glowing eyes flicking between the two. Please stop, he said softly, his telepathic voice trembling. Fighting won't help. The child's plea was like a cold splash of water. Both Alec and Carell fell silent, guilt and exhaustion settling over them. The arrival of a threat. The quiet didn't last. A faint, rhythmic vibration began to pulse through the floor, so subtle at first it was easy to dismiss as paranoia. But Alec's instincts screamed otherwise. He moved to the window, peeling back the edge of the tattered curtain. Damn it, he muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. What is it? Carell asked, her earlier anger giving way to fear. They've found us, Alec said, stepping back. Outside, the unmistakable glow of search drones painted the night in eerie flashes of blue and white. The faint hum of engines grew louder, a sinister harmony that set Carell's nerves on edge. How? She demanded, clutching Linux tighter. They've probably got trackers on their tech, Alec said, grabbing his gear. Or maybe someone saw us coming in. Doesn't matter. What matters is getting out of here alive. An uneasy alliance. As the drones closed in, Alec and Carell were forced to put aside their differences. Alec rummaged through his bag, pulling out a small device that looked like a cross between a flashlight and a grenade. What's that? Carell asked, eyeing it warily. EMP pulse, Alec said. Short range. It'll fry the drones, but it won't stop the soldiers if they're nearby. When I set it off, we'll have about a minute to get clear. Carell hesitated, her mind racing. What about Linux? He can't run as fast as we can. Alec glanced at the boy, then back at her. I'll carry him, he said simply. Carell's eyes narrowed. Why would you do that? You don't even know us. Because leaving a kid behind isn't something I can live with, Alec said, his voice steady. Now, are you coming or not? Carell studied him for a moment, then gave a curt nod. Fine. But if you drop him? I won't, Alec interrupted, holding out his arms. Linux clung to his mother for a moment before reluctantly letting go. It's okay, Mom, he said telepathically. I trust him. The escape. The moment Alec activated the EMP, the air filled with a sharp, high-pitched whine as the drone circuits fried. Sparks rained down like tiny fireworks, and the oppressive hum fell silent. Go? Alec shouted, bolting for the back exit with Linux in his arms and Carell close behind. The safe house erupted into chaos as the enemy forces realized their quarry was on the move. Shouts echoed through the night, and the distant thud of boots on pavement grew louder. Alec led them through a maze of alleys, his knowledge of the city's layout proving invaluable. But the pursuers were relentless, their searchlights cutting through the darkness like blades. This way, Alec said, veering sharply into an abandoned subway entrance. Carell hesitated, her instincts screaming that it was a trap. But the sound of approaching footsteps left her no choice. She followed, her heart pounding as they descended into the underground. The underground confrontation. The subway tunnels were a labyrinth of shadows and echoes, the perfect place for an ambush. Alex slowed his pace, scanning the darkness for signs of danger. We can't keep running forever, Carell said, her voice a whisper. I know, Alec replied. That's why we're going to set a trap. Carell raised an eyebrow. A trap? Against them? Got a better idea? Alec shot back. Carell fell silent, her mind racing. She didn't like it, but she couldn't deny they were out of options. Setting the trap. Alec worked quickly, using scraps of metal and other debris to rig a makeshift explosive. Carell kept watch, her glowing eyes scanning the tunnel for any sign of movement. Linux stayed close, his small frame trembling with fear. Will this work? Carell asked, her skepticism clear. It'll slow them down, Alec said. That's all we need right now. The trap was set just in time. The first wave of soldiers entered the tunnel, their weapons gleaming in the dim light. Alec waited until they were in position, then triggered the explosive. The blast echoed through the tunnel, sending a shockwave of heat and debris cascading over the enemy forces. The soldiers were thrown into disarray, their advance halted. Move! Alec shouted, leading Carell and Linux deeper into the subway. A growing bond. As the trio fled into the darkness, a fragile sense of camaraderie began to form. Alex's quick thinking and willingness to risk his life for them had earned Carell's grudging respect, and Linux's innocent trust in him only deepened the connection. "You're not what I expected," Carell admitted as they paused to catch their breath. "Neither are you," Alec replied, a faint smile tugging at his lips. For the first time since their ordeal began, Carell allowed herself to hope. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The cavernous depths of the old subway stretched endlessly, cloaked in shadows that whispered of things long forgotten. Alex stood at the forefront, his body a shield against the uncertainty ahead. His breath fogged in the chilled air, but his resolve burned like fire. Behind him, Carell and Linux huddled together, their trust in him the only anchor in the storm of danger. "We can't keep running forever," Carell murmured, her voice barely audible over the distant echoes of pursuit. Alec glanced back, his gaze sharp but not unkind. "We won't have to." Carell frowned. "What are you planning?" "To make sure they stop chasing us," Alec said simply. His tone carried a weight that sent a shiver down Carell's spine. A critical decision. The trio emerged into an abandoned maintenance bay, a space filled with rusted machinery and forgotten relics of a city that had moved on without it. Alex scanned the area, his eyes narrowing as he formulated a plan. "This place is defensible," he said mostly to himself. "If we're careful, we can hold them off long enough to find another way out." Carell's hands tightened around Linux's shoulders. "You're talking about fighting them, aren't you?" Alec met her gaze, his expression unyielding. "If it comes to that, yes." Carell's glowing eyes flared with anger. "You don't get to make that choice for us. Linux is my son. Our lives aren't pawns in your game of heroism." "It's not heroism," Alec shot back. "It's survival. You think they'll stop if we just keep running? They won't. They'll hunt you down and they'll kill both of you. I'm trying to make sure that doesn't happen." The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Linux's quiet voice. "Mom? I trust him." Carell's shoulders sagged. She didn't trust humans, not fully, but she trusted her son's instincts. And Alec, for all his flaws, had risked his life for them more than once. "Fine," she said at last. "But if you get us killed, I'll haunt you." Preparation for battle. Alec got to work immediately, repurposing the old machinery into improvised defenses. Carell watched him in silence for a while before finally stepping forward. "What can I do?" she asked reluctantly. Alec looked up, surprised. Then he handed her a bundle of wires. "Help me rig this. We're setting traps." Carell nodded, her hands moving with practiced precision. Despite their differences, the two worked in tandem, their shared determination to protect Linux bridging the gap between them. Linux, meanwhile, sat on the sidelines, his small face a mask of concentration. "They're coming closer," he said suddenly, his voice resonating in both their minds. Alec froze. "How do you know that?" "I can feel them," Linux said. "Their anger, their fear. It's like a storm." Carell exchanged a look with Alec. Her son's abilities were still a mystery even to her, but there was no time to dwell on it now. The first wave. The enemy arrived sooner than expected. A squad of heavily armed soldiers stormed the maintenance bay, their weapons casting eerie glows against the walls. Alec's first trap triggered perfectly. A burst of electrical energy surged through the floor, knocking the frontline soldiers off their feet. But more were coming. "Stay behind me," Alec barked, raising his weapon. Carell ignored him, stepping forward with her own hands glowing faintly. She unleashed a burst of energy that sent another wave of soldiers scrambling for cover. "I thought you didn't trust humans," Alec said, a wry grin tugging at his lips as they fought side by side. "I don't," Carell replied, her eyes blazing. "But I trust you just enough to make this work." A dire turn. The fight dragged on, each wave of attackers more relentless than the last. Despite their best efforts, Alec and Carell were being overwhelmed. "We can't hold them off forever," Carell shouted over the din. "We don't need forever," Alec replied, his voice grim. "Just long enough." "For what?" "For this," Alec said, triggering the final trap. The explosion was deafening, collapsing part of the maintenance bay and cutting off the enemy's advance. But it also left the trio trapped, with no clear way out. The Protector's resolve. As the dust settled, Alec turned to Karel and Linux. "We're not done yet," he said firmly. "I'll get you out of here. I promise." Karel's gaze softened, the weight of the battle etched into her features. "Why are you doing this, Alec? Why risk your life for us?" Alec hesitated, then said quietly, "Because I've lost people before. People I cared about. I couldn't save them, but I can save you." Linux reached out, his small hand resting on Alec's arm. "Thank you," the boy said, his voice filled with genuine gratitude. In that moment something shifted between them. Alec wasn't just a man helping strangers. He was their protector, their anchor in a world that sought to tear them apart. A flicker of hope. Despite the odds, the trio pressed on, finding a narrow tunnel that led away from the wreckage. The path was treacherous, but Alec's determination never wavered. As they emerged into the open air, the first rays of dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, they allowed themselves a moment to breathe. "What now?" Karel asked, her voice weary but hopeful. Alec looked at her, then at Linux. "Now we find a way to stop running. Together." The stars were hidden behind storm clouds, the once vast sky now suffocatingly dark. A distant rumble echoed through the valley, not of thunder but of engines. They were coming, an unstoppable force bearing down on Alec, Karel, and Linux like a storm that couldn't be outrun. "We can't hide anymore," Alec said, his voice low but steady as he surveyed the barren canyon ahead. The air smelled of dust and impending violence. Karel stepped forward, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Who said anything about hiding?" The final stand. Alec, Karel, and Linux had chosen their battleground carefully. A narrow canyon with sheer rock walls that could funnel their pursuers into a trap. The terrain was harsh, but it gave them one critical advantage: control. Alec paced the perimeter, checking the traps and makeshift barriers he'd erected from fallen debris and salvaged machinery. Each step carried the weight of his resolve. This was it, the moment he'd been building toward since the fire. "You sure this will work?" Karel asked, her voice laced with doubt. "It has to," Alec replied. He glanced at Linux, who stood nearby, his small hands glowing faintly. "You're the key, kid. Stay focused and remember what we talked about." Linux nodded solemnly. "I'm ready. The enemy arrives." The rumble of engines grew louder, and soon the canyon mouth was filled with the blinding lights of armored vehicles. The soldiers spilled out in perfect formation, their black suits glinting like the carapaces of insects. At their center stood Commander Ralek, his imposing figure radiating authority. "Enough games," Ralek's voice boomed, amplified by a device on his wrist. "Turn over the alien and her offspring and you might yet live." Alec stepped into the open, his silhouette a dark figure against the rising moonlight. "Come and take them." Ralek smirked. "As you wish. The battle begins." The first wave of soldiers surged forward, their weapons blazing. Alec's traps triggered in rapid succession. Explosions, collapsing rockfalls, and blinding flashes of light that sent the enemy into chaos. Karel joined the fray, her alien energy crackling as she unleashed a barrage of strikes. Her movements were graceful yet deadly, a blur of light and power. Alec fought with grim efficiency, his improvised weapon a mix of human and alien technology. He moved with purpose, covering Karel's flank and ensuring Linux remained protected. "You're not bad at this," Karel quipped between attacks. "Let's hope I don't have to get better," Alec replied, his voice strained. The turning point. Despite their efforts, the sheer number of soldiers began to overwhelm them. Alec took a hit to his shoulder, gritting his teeth as blood seeped through his jacket. Karel faltered, her energy reserves dwindling. "We can't hold them off," she shouted, desperation creeping into her voice. Linux, who had stayed hidden until now, stepped forward. His eyes glowed brighter than ever, his small frame trembling with the intensity of his power. "Stay back," Alec barked. But Linux didn't listen. He raised his hands, and the canyon seemed to tremble as a wave of energy erupted from him. The soldiers froze, their movements sluggish as if caught in a current of invisible force. "What's happening?" Karel asked, her voice filled with awe and fear. Alex's eyes widened. "He's doing it. He's stopping them. Confronting the commander." As Linux held the soldiers at bay, Alec and Karel turned their attention to Commander Ralek, who stood unfazed at the center of the chaos. "Impressive," Ralek said, clapping slowly. "But it won't be enough." He activated a device on his wrist, and Linux's energy faltered. The boy cried out, collapsing to his knees. "No!" Karel screamed, rushing to her son's side. Alec charged Ralek, his fists clenched and his resolve unshakable. The two men clashed, their fight a brutal, desperate struggle. Alec fought with the strength of a man who had everything to lose, while Ralek's precision and training made him a formidable opponent. "You're just a man," Ralek sneered, pinning Alec to the ground. "What makes you think you can protect them?" Alec grinned through the pain. "Because I'm not alone. A combined effort." Karel, her energy reignited by her maternal fury, unleashed a devastating blast that threw Ralek off Alec. Together they pressed the advantage, their combined strength forcing the commander into retreat. Meanwhile, Linux, struggling to his feet, tapped into his powers once more. This time he focused on Ralek's device, causing it to overload and explode in a shower of sparks. Ralek, disarmed and defeated, glared at them with cold hatred. "This isn't over," he hissed before retreating with the remnants of his forces. Victory, but at a cost. As the dust settled, Alec slumped against a rock, his injuries catching up with him. Karel knelt beside Linux, her hands trembling as she checked him for injuries. "You did it," Alec said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. Karel looked at him, her expression unreadable. "We did it." Linux, despite his fatigue, managed a small smile. "Thank you, both of you," setting the stage for what's next. The trio stood together at the edge of the canyon, the horizon bathed in the first light of dawn. Their victory had come at a cost, but it had forged an unbreakable bond between them. "What now?" Karel asked, her voice soft. Alec glanced at her, then at Linux. "Now we keep moving. Together." The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, they faced it not as strangers but as a family united by trust, sacrifice, and the unyielding will to survive. The morning sun crept over the canyon's edge, casting long shadows over the battlefield. Smoke hung in the air, mingling with the scent of scorched earth and burnt machinery. Alec leaned against a jagged rock, his breath shallow, blood staining his makeshift bandages. For the first time in days, silence reigned, but it was the kind of silence that came with loss and hard-won survival. "We're alive," Alec muttered, as if saying it aloud could make it more real. Karel crouched beside Linux, her glowing hands trembling as they healed a bruise on his forehead. Her expression was a mixture of exhaustion and quiet determination. "Alive? For now," she whispered, her gaze drifting toward the horizon, where danger still loomed unseen. Assessing the damage. The aftermath of the showdown was harsh. The traps Alec had set had destroyed much of the canyon, leaving behind jagged rocks and debris. Linux was still pale, his strength depleted from the immense power he had unleashed. Alec surveyed the battlefield, his mind racing with questions. Had they done enough to dissuade Ralek from pursuing them further? Would the Empire send reinforcements? "We bought ourselves time," Alec said, his voice steady despite the uncertainty he felt. "But we can't stay here." Karel nodded, though her expression betrayed her doubt. "We've been running for so long. Where do we go now?" Alec glanced at Linux, who sat quietly, gazing at his hands as if afraid of what they could do. "Someplace where he can learn to control that power. Someplace safe. Healing and reflection." That night, the trio found shelter in a small cave hidden deep within the canyon. Alec started a fire, its warm glow a stark contrast to the cold, unforgiving night outside. Karel sat beside Linux, her arms wrapped protectively around him. She looked at Alec, her expression softening. "Why did you stay? Why did you risk everything for us?" Alec paused, his gaze fixed on the flames. "Because no one should face what you've been through alone. I've lost people before, people I couldn't save. I wasn't going to let that happen again. Carell reached out, placing a hand on his arm. Thank you. For everything. A moment of clarity. As they rested, Linux spoke up, his voice small but clear. I was scared back there. But when I used my power, I wasn't just fighting them. I was protecting you. Alec and Carell exchanged a look, their pride in the boy evident. You did more than protect us, Carell said, her voice filled with emotion. You showed them that we're not weak. That we're not alone. Alec leaned forward, his tone serious. But that power is dangerous, Linux. We need to find someone who can teach you to control it. Someone who understands it better than we do. A new purpose. The next morning they set out from the canyon, their path uncertain but their resolve stronger than ever. Alec had salvaged a map from one of the soldiers, which hinted at a hidden colony where those who opposed the Empire sought refuge. It's a long shot, Alec admitted, pointing to the marked location on the map. But if there are others out there, people who can help, we need to find them. Carell studied the map, her hope rekindled. If they're out there, they'll know how to train Linux. And maybe they'll fight with us. Foreshadowing the future. As they traveled, Alec couldn't shake the feeling that the Empire's reach would catch up to them again. The scars from the battle were a stark reminder of the danger they faced, but they were also a testament to their strength. Carell's confidence grew as she began to trust Alec more deeply. She saw in him a resilience and courage that matched her own, and together they forged a bond that would be tested in the days to come. Linux too began to change. His fear of his power slowly gave way to a determination to understand it. He clung to Alec's words. Strength isn't just about what you can do, it's about how you use it. Hope on the horizon. As the sun set on their journey, the trio reached the edge of a dense forest that stretched as far as the eye could see. Somewhere within lay the colony, a sanctuary that could change everything. Carell looked at Alec, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. This is our chance. A new start. For all of us. Alec nodded, his hand resting on Linux's shoulder. We'll find them. And when we do, we'll be ready for whatever comes next. Closing scene. The forest loomed before them, dark and full of mystery, but it was also alive with the promise of new beginnings. As they stepped into the shadows, the faint sound of voices reached their ears, voices that spoke of resistance, of hope, of a future worth fighting for. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, Alec, Carell, and Linux weren't just surviving. They were moving toward something greater. Together they were a family bound not by blood but by trust, sacrifice, and the unyielding belief that even in the darkest times, hope could endure.